I think Bitcoin is not compatible with current U.S. sanction policy. I think Bitcoin is not compatible with the way that governments worldwide have weaponized the money.
Right.
And I think that there is going to be an inevitable clash between the two. You have an open monetary network where you can sign up, download a wallet. You don't need a KYC. And then you have a system where it's completely, even though it's not really, the AML system, it's not really that effective. So what's that clash look like to you? What's your take?
Yeah, I think more than a clash, in the near term anyway, I think it's closer to a lifeboat. If you sort of zoom in to the competitive situation, so if you take sanctions, for example, so the way that you can sanction somebody with a US dollar is that you can effectively stop them from using the dollar. The thing is, Bitcoin has a quirk where you can identify wallets. And so assuming that there's some real world nexus that is ultimately exposed to the US government, then, if a Chinese company is exporting product to, whatever, Egypt, there tends to be some kind of nexus there, like some paper trail. And so there are a lot of situations where I think that Bitcoin directly threatens sanctions less than it might seem on the face. Certainly for sort of gray market transactions, which don't leave a paper trail anyway, that's true. But then for a lot of those transactions, they also manage to use the dollar one way or the other through bribes and so on. So I don't think there's so much a direct clash. I think it's more like we are draining the explosive out of the or the air out of the balloon, to use less kinetic terminology, where you'll have a lot of commerce that will migrate over to Bitcoin, and then if there's a large amount of commerce in that area, let's say, I don't know, content or even export import, then you could get more transactions making use of that in order to avoid sanctions. But I think it's not quite as direct as it might seem on the face. I think the larger issue, and the thing that has people like Elizabeth Warren in a bunch, is that sort of head-on substitute or conflict between Bitcoin and financial markets, so the financial oligarchy. Every single country on earth, if you go to the capital city and you look for the tallest skyscrapers, chances are it's a bank, right? Every so often you'll have like a resource company, because whatever, Malaysia or something. But generally speaking, almost all the skyscrapers are banks. Banks are fantastically profitable, as you would expect in a crony fiat system. They have enormous power everywhere. So more than sanctions per se, I think that's really where the battle comes in. I think that's who Elizabeth Warren is carrying water for. She's not doing it for the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, they donate money, but they don't donate to politicians. I think she's carrying it for the banks, and that's I think the grand battle.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you would think when the Occupy Wall Street movement was a thing, she was like the main proponent of that.
Money talks.
And now she's
donations speak loud.
And they do, don't they? And then she gets Jamie Dimon. Go ahead.
Going back to the earlier discussion of kind of why things broke this way, I did not expect that to happen. All right, I did not expect the largest companies in the world to make common cause with the socialists. All right, I assumed that they would go with the sort of soft socialism of the U.S. Republican Party. We want low taxes, we want light regulation. And what surprised me anyway is that, boy, they just went all the way over. So, I assume what they're thinking is that with enough campaign cash, you can kind of tame the beast, right? So, you can put people like AOC or, you can, I don't know, who are some of the more extreme. Anyway, the squad, you can put them in a box, and then, you can make enough friends with Elizabeth Warren and Nancy Pelosi that you can basically disarm the socialists from within. I assume that's what they're aiming for. But anyway, I was surprised by that. I assumed that, once money really made its way into politics and we got this sort of corporatist union of state and company, which again has an F word that becomes an ism, but we have to avoid that word. I didn't think that they would make common cause with the socialists.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, but this isn't that what always happens though? That's kind of, like I forget what the
In 1930s Germany, they went the other direction. So they took the lesser of two evils and they teamed up with the National Socialists as opposed to the International Socialists.
Okay, fine. But Peter, we all know that it's two sides of the same coin.
They
Right?
are almost identical.
Hold on, I have to go full. I have to go full screen.
Always.
So if you go like all the way, I don't know if I'm left right now, but if you go all the way left, there's communists, and then you go a couple steps to the right, there's fascists.
Yeah.
And then you go all the way to the other side, and you get like individualists and libertarian and all that. So
For sure.
and it's in the name. It's in the name. What the party that was in power in the 30s, they put it in the name, that word socialist.
Yeah, literally. Right. So, if we put them, like if we array them on a scale of ANCAP to communism. So, okay, these are random numbers. Don't quote me on this. The German communists at that time in the 1930s, let's call them a 60, and then the National Socialists were like a 50 in terms of their progression towards communism. I mean, they were almost the same freaking party. But the thing is, the capitalists chose the lesser of two evils from their perspective, right? The main difference being that the National Socialists were okay with companies running their, making profits, getting nice take-home pay, keeping the original staff. Nobody has to go up against the wall. What they said is, look, you can do whatever you want as long as you obey. Okay, now the obey, ultimately got real close to communism. But anyway, so, in that grand scheme of socialism, they were slightly less socialist from companies' perspective than the communists. And so the companies went with the lesser of two evils. What surprised me in the US, and I think really around the world, and maybe this is the genius of Klaus Schwab, but what surprised me was that, generally the main parties in every country are socialist. I can't think of a country at the moment where the main party is not socialist. They're just two flavors of socialism. But what surprised me is that these big companies went with the worse of the two. They didn't go with the lesser of two evils. They went with the greater of two evils. And I think, I don't know that they planned this out in their heads, but I think ultimately they've put a bet that they can bribe the worst of two evils into at least punishing them last. I'm trying to avoid violent words. We used to be able to say a lot of things we can't, but at any rate, they want to be punished last by these people. But that really surprised me. I assumed when the corporatists made their play to take over the country that they would go with the soft socialists and not the hard socialists. But of course, see people like Elizabeth Warren. I mean, so far their strategy is paying off. I'm very impressed. It's working out just the way they wanted, where people like Elizabeth Warren are now going from, anti-Wall Street to discovering how important it is to have a, stable financial system that has no outside interference. So, I mean, kudos to them. Boy, it's worked like a charm so far.